You know what they say about hotel carpets? They're designed to hide stains. Blood, wine, tears, whatever life throws at them, those ugly geometric patterns just absorb it all and keep on looking like overpriced garbage. I never gave much thought to hotel carpets until I found myself staring at one while my wife Claire screwed my best friend Mark on the bed 3 feet away from me. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd driven 2 hours back from a marketing conference in Boston, armed with her favorite flowers and a bottle of wine, because she'd called that morning claiming she was sick and staying at the Riverside Inn to avoid giving me whatever bug she'd caught. What a thoughtful wife, right? Taking care of her husband's health by quarantining herself in a hotel room. Except she wasn't quarantining herself. She was riding Mark Bennett like he was the last horse out of Dodge. "James," Claire's voice cracked like a whip as she spotted me in the doorway. Her face went from flushed pleasure to white terror in about half a second. Mark, being the quick thinker he is, just froze there like a deer in headlights, still tangled up with my wife of 16 years. I stood there holding those stupid flowers, yellow roses, her favorites, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not rage, not heartbreak, just this weird, detached curiosity about how the hell we'd gotten here. "It's not what it looks like," Mark stammered, finally finding his voice. He was scrambling for his clothes, his face red as a lobster. "Really?" I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. "Because it looks like you're fucking my wife in a hotel room she told me she was using to recover from the flu." Claire wrapped the sheet around herself, tears already starting. "James, please, let me explain." "Explain what? That you've been lying to me? That my best friend since college has been screwing my wife behind my back? That you two are such idiots you couldn't even pick a hotel in another town?" The flowers hit the carpet with a soft thud. Those ugly brown and gold swirls seemed to swallow them up instantly, like they'd never existed at all. "How long?" I asked. "James," Claire started. "How? Long?" Mark was pulling on his pants, hopping around like an idiot. "Look, man, this just happened. We didn't plan." 6 months, Claire whispered. 6 months. I did the math automatically, the way my marketing brain always did. 6 months of late nights at the office, 6 months of weekend consulting projects, 6 months of her being too tired, too stressed, too busy for me, 6 months of Mark coming over for dinner, sitting at my table, drinking my beer, and looking me in the eye like nothing was wrong. "Get dressed," I told Claire. "Both of you. We're going to talk about this like adults." But even as I said it, I knew we weren't, because adults don't betray their spouses and best friends. Adults don't lie for 6 months straight. Adults don't get caught in hotel rooms like teenagers sneaking around behind their parents' backs. I walked out of that room and sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at the brick facade of the Riverside Inn. It was one of those places that tried to look classy but just ended up looking desperate. Fake colonial architecture with vinyl siding and a parking lot full of potholes. The perfect place for my marriage to die. My phone buzzed. Text from Claire. "Please come back. We need to talk." Another buzz. Mark. "Dude, I'm so sorry. Let me explain." I turned off the phone and drove home to our house on Maple Street. The house we'd bought when Lizzie was born, with the white picket fence and the mortgage that would take another 12 years to pay off. The house where I'd thought I was building a life with someone who loved me. Lizzie was at her friend Emma's house for the weekend, which meant I had the place to myself to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my leather recliner, the one Claire always complained about but I'd refused to get rid of, and tried to process what I'd just seen. The thing is, I should have been furious. I should have been throwing things, screaming, maybe even throwing a punch at Mark's smug face. But instead, I just felt tired. Tired and stupid, and like I'd been living in a fantasy for the past 6 months while everyone else was living in reality. My phone started ringing. Claire. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Mark this time, voicemail. Then Claire again, then Mark. Then a number I didn't recognize. Probably one of them calling from the hotel phone. After the 7th call, I turned the phone off completely and poured another bourbon. That's when I noticed the credit card statement on the kitchen counter. Claire always handled our finances, said she was better with numbers than me. Funny thing about being a marketing director. You get pretty good with numbers yourself. Good enough to spot a pattern when you see one. Riverside Inn, 127.43, 2 weeks ago. Riverside Inn, 127.43, 3 weeks before that. Riverside Inn, 127.43, going back months. She'd been paying for their little love nest with our joint credit card. Our money. Money I'd earned working 60-hour weeks to pay for the house, the car, Lizzie's college fund, and apparently my wife's affair. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud, sitting there in my kitchen with a bourbon in one hand and evidence of my wife's betrayal in the other. Because if you don't laugh at something that absurd, you'll probably lose your mind. The front door opened around midnight. Claire came in alone, her hair still messy, her makeup smeared. She looked like she'd been crying for hours. "Where's your boyfriend?" I asked. "Don't call him that." "What should I call him? Your lover? Your side piece? The guy who's been banging you in hotel rooms while I work my ass off to pay for it?" She flinched. "James, please, let me explain." "I'm listening." She sat down across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten breakfast that morning, where she'd kissed me goodbye and told me she loved me before I left for Boston, where she'd probably been planning her afternoon with Mark while buttering her toast. "It started by accident," she began. "Mark came by to drop off those papers for you, remember? The ones from your old job. You were working late, and I was feeling lonely, and we just started talking. Talking. Yes, just talking at first, about how we never see each other anymore, how you're always at the office or traveling, how I felt like we were becoming strangers. So you decided to become intimate strangers with my best friend instead. It wasn't like that." Her voice rose, then she caught herself and lowered it. "It just happened, James. One conversation led to another, and then you were fucking him in hotel rooms. Don't be crude." "Crude? Claire, I caught you in bed with another man. I think we're past worrying about being crude." She was crying again, but I noticed she wasn't apologizing. Not really. She was explaining, justifying, making it sound like something that just happened to her instead of something she chose to do. "Are you in love with him?" I asked. The question hung in the air for a long moment. Claire stared at her hands, twisted her wedding ring around her finger. The ring I'd saved for 3 months to buy, back when we were young and stupid and thought love was enough. "I don't know," she whispered, and that's when I knew my marriage was over. The next morning, I moved into the guest bedroom. Not because Claire asked me to. She actually begged me to stay in our room, said we needed to work through this together. But I couldn't stand the thought of lying next to her, wondering if she was thinking about Mark, wondering if she'd ever really stopped. Lizzie came home Sunday afternoon full of stories about her weekend with Emma, chattering about some movie they'd watched and how Emma's mom had let them order pizza for breakfast. She was 15, old enough to sense something was wrong, but young enough to hope it wasn't serious. "Why are you sleeping in the guest room?" she asked, standing in the doorway with her overnight bag. "Your mom and I are having some problems," I said. "We're working through them." "Are you getting divorced?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Not because I hadn't thought about it, but because hearing it from my daughter made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "I don't know, sweetheart. I hope not." She nodded, trying to look mature and understanding, but I could see the fear in her eyes. Lizzie was a smart kid. Honor roll, debate team, already talking about college. She knew that working through problems was adult code for, your life is about to change in ways you can't control. Claire tried to act normal that week. She made dinner every night, asked about my day, even suggested we watch a movie together on Wednesday. But there was this desperate edge to everything she did, like she was performing the role of loving wife instead of actually being one. Mark called me at work on Tuesday. "We need to talk," he said. "No, we don't." "Come on, man, this is killing me. You've been my best friend for 20 years. "Yeah, and you've been screwing my wife for 6 months. Funny how that changes things." "It wasn't supposed to happen. I never meant for it to go this far." "How far did you mean for it to go, Mark? First base? Second? Or did you just plan to emotionally cheat with her and call it friendship?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I love her, James." And there it was. The thing Claire couldn't say, Mark had no problem admitting. He loved my wife. Had probably loved her for months, maybe years. Had sat at my dinner table and laughed at my jokes and helped me move furniture and loved my wife the whole time. "Then you can have her," I said, and hung up. But of course, it wasn't that simple. There was Lizzie to think about, and the house, and 16 years of shared history. There were joint bank accounts and insurance policies and a whole life we'd built together that couldn't just be dissolved with a phone call. Claire seemed to think we could work through it. She bought books about rebuilding trust after infidelity. She suggested couples therapy. She even offered to quit her job at the consulting firm where Mark worked, though she was careful not to promise she'd stop seeing him entirely. "I need time to figure out what I want," she said on Thursday night. We were sitting in the living room, her on the couch, me in my recliner, like we were negotiating a business deal instead of trying to save our marriage. "What you want," I repeated. "Claire, you're married. You have a daughter. What you want should be to fix the mess you made. It's not that simple. It is that simple. You choose your family or you choose Mark. There's no middle ground here. She looked at me with something that might have been pity. You don't understand. This isn't just about sex, James. Mark and I connect on a level that you and I never have. We talk about things, real things. He listens to me. I listen to you. No, you don't. You hear me, but you don't listen. When I tell you about my day, you're thinking about work. When I try to talk about my feelings, you try to fix them instead of just understanding them. Mark gets me in a way you never have. It was like being stabbed with a rusty knife. Not just the betrayal, but the casual way she dismissed 16 years of marriage, of trying to be a good husband, of building a life together. Apparently none of that mattered because Mark was a better listener. So what do you want to do? I asked. I want to separate for a while. Give us both some space to figure out what we really want. You mean give you space to be with Mark without feeling guilty about it? That's not fair. Fair? I stood up, and for the first time since I'd found them together, I felt real anger. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been telling me you were unhappy instead of sneaking around behind my back. Fair would have been asking for a divorce before you started fucking my best friend. Fair would have been not using our credit card to pay for your hotel rooms. She had the grace to look ashamed about that last part. I'll pay you back. With what money? The salary you earn at the job where your boyfriend works? He's not my boyfriend. What is he then? Your lover, your partner, your soulmate? I spit the last word like it tasted bad. What do you call a man who's been screwing another man's wife for 6 months? Claire stood up too, her face flushed with anger. I call him someone who makes me feel alive again, someone who reminds me that I'm more than just a wife and mother, someone who sees me as a person instead of just a function in his life. A function? Is that what you think you are to me? Aren't I? When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, James, my fears, my hopes for the future? When was the last time you looked at me and saw Claire instead of just the woman who makes your dinner and does your laundry and takes care of your daughter? Our daughter. Yes, our daughter. Who's going to be devastated when she finds out her parents' marriage is a lie? It's not a lie, or at least it wasn't until you made it one. We stared at each other across the living room, and I realized we were strangers. Maybe we had been for years, and I'd just been too busy, or too comfortable, or too stupid to notice. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the girl I'd married, and I probably wasn't the man she'd fallen in love with either. I'll move out this weekend, I said. James, no, this is your house too. No, it's not. Not anymore. You and Mark have made that pretty clear. I went upstairs and started packing. Clothes, books, a few pictures of Lizzie. Not much else seemed worth taking. 16 years of marriage, and it all fit into 3 suitcases and a box of personal stuff from my home office. Lizzie found me packing on Friday night. You're really leaving? Just for a while, sweetheart. Your mom and I need some time apart. Because of what she did. I stopped folding shirts and looked at my daughter. She was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, looking older than her 15 years. You know, I'm not stupid, Dad. Mom's been acting weird for months, and now you're sleeping in the guest room and packing your stuff. Plus, Emma's mom saw Mom with some guy at a restaurant last month. She didn't want to say anything, but Emma told me. Great. So not only was my marriage over, but it was small-town gossip. By now, half of Millbrook probably knew that Claire Carter was cheating on her husband with his best friend. I'm sorry, Lizzie. I know this is hard. Are you getting divorced? I don't know yet. Maybe. She nodded, trying to be brave. Where are you going to live? I found a small apartment downtown. It's not much, but it's temporary. Can I visit? Of course, anytime you want. She hugged me then, fierce and tight, and I could feel her trying not to cry. My strong, smart daughter, caught in the middle of her parents' mess. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything. I finished packing and loaded my car. Claire watched from the kitchen window but didn't come outside. Maybe she was relieved. Maybe she was already planning to call Mark to tell him the coast was clear. I drove to my new apartment on 2nd Street, above a coffee shop that closed at 6 and across from a laundromat that never seemed to close. It was a far cry from our house on Maple Street, but it was mine. No shared history, no memories of better times, no ghosts of the man I used to be. I unpacked my 3 suitcases and 1 box, opened a beer, and sat in the single chair I'd brought from the house. Through the window, I could see people going about their lives, walking their dogs, coming home from work, picking up their dry cleaning. Normal people with normal problems. My phone buzzed. Text from Claire. I'm sorry it came to this. I typed back, No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. She didn't reply. Living alone after 16 years of marriage is like learning to walk again after a car accident. Everything feels wrong. The silence, the empty space, the fact that no one cares if you eat cereal for dinner or stay up until 3 in the morning watching old movies. The apartment was small but clean, with hardwood floors that creaked when I walked and windows that looked out onto Main Street. I could see the coffee shop below, the laundromat across the street, and if I craned my neck, the river that ran through the center of town. It wasn't home, but it was a place to figure out what came next. I established a routine: coffee at 6, shower, work by 8, lunch at my desk, because going to restaurants meant running into people who knew about Claire and Mark, and I wasn't ready for the sympathetic looks and awkward conversations. Home by 7, dinner from whatever takeout place hadn't closed yet, bed by 11. Weekends were harder. That's when the silence really got to me, when I had too much time to think about what my life had become. I started going to the gym on Saturday mornings, not because I particularly wanted to get in shape, but because it was something to do, something that didn't involve sitting in my apartment feeling sorry for myself. That's where I met Big Ed. Ed Kowalski was 63 years old, built like a refrigerator, and had been running Millbrook Boxing Gym since before I was born. He took one look at me fumbling with the speed bag and shook his head. "You're doing it all wrong," he said. "You're trying to muscle it. Boxing isn't about strength, it's about timing, rhythm, knowing when to hit and when to move." "I'm not trying to become a boxer," I told him. "I'm just trying to work off some stress." "What kind of stress?" "The kind that comes from finding your wife in bed with your best friend." Ed nodded like this was the most normal thing in the world. "Ah, that kind of stress. Yeah, you're going to need more than a speed bag for that." He taught me how to wrap my hands properly, how to throw a jab without breaking my wrist, how to move my feet so I wouldn't fall over when I threw a cross. More importantly, he taught me how to focus my anger into something productive instead of just letting it eat me alive. "The thing about getting betrayed," Ed said one Saturday morning while I worked the heavy bag, "is that it makes you want to hit back. Natural instinct. Problem is, most people hit back at the wrong target." "What do you mean?" "They hit back at themselves. Blame themselves for not seeing it coming, for not being good enough, for not fighting harder to keep what was theirs. But that's just another kind of losing." I threw a combination: jab, cross, hook, and felt the satisfying thud of leather on leather. "So what's the right target?" Ed smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "The people who actually hurt you, but you gotta be smart about it. Can't just go throwing punches. You gotta think like a boxer. Set up your shots, wait for the right opening, make every hit count." I was starting to understand why I liked Ed. The isolation wasn't just physical. My social life, such as it was, had been built around couple friends. People Claire and I knew from the neighborhood, from Lizzie's school, from work functions. Now that I was single, those friendships got complicated fast. Tom and Jennifer Morrison lived 2 houses down from Claire and me. We'd had barbecues together, went to the same church, carpooled to school events. Tom called me the week after I moved out. "Hey man, heard about you and Claire. That sucks." "Yeah, it does. Listen, Jen and I were wondering if you wanted to come over for dinner this weekend. Just the 3 of us, you know? We don't want you to feel like you have to disappear just because things got complicated." I appreciated the gesture. I really did. But I also knew how these things worked. Tom and Jennifer were trying to be good friends, but they were also neighbors with Claire. They had to live next door to her, see her every day, make small talk over the fence. Eventually, they'd have to choose sides, and I was the one who'd moved out. "Thanks, but I'm not really ready for social stuff yet," I told him. "Sure, I get it, but the invitation stands. And James? For what it's worth, I think Claire's making a huge mistake." I believed he meant it. I also believed he'd never say it to Claire's face. Dave Chen had been a different kind of friend, a guy I'd known since college, someone who'd been in my wedding, who'd helped me move into the house on Maple Street. We'd stayed close over the years, got together for drinks every few weeks, talked about work and sports and the general absurdity of middle age. Dave called me 3 weeks after I moved out. "Dude, I heard about Claire and Mark. What the hell?" "Yeah, it's been a fun month." "I can't believe Mark would do that to you. I mean, I never liked the guy much, but I didn't think he was that big of a piece of shit." This was news to me. "You never liked Mark?" "Come on, James. The guy's a narcissist. Everything's always about him. His job, his problems, his opinions. I always wondered why you put up with him." "He was my friend." "He was your friend when it was convenient for him. Oh, trust me, I've seen his type before. They're great at being charming when they want something, but they don't actually care about anyone but themselves." I thought about this. Mark had been charming, that was true. Life of the party. Always had a story or a joke, made friends easily wherever he went. But when I tried to think of times when he'd been there for me, really there, not just hanging around, the list was surprisingly short. Anyway, Dave continued, I wanted you to know that Sarah and I are on your side. Whatever you need, we're here. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. You want to grab a beer this weekend? Get out of your head for a while. I did want that. I wanted to sit in a bar with an old friend and pretend my life wasn't falling apart. I wanted to drink too much and complain about women and wake up hungover, but not alone. Yeah, that sounds good. We met at O'Malley's on Friday night. It was the kind of place where the beer was cheap, the music was loud, and nobody cared about your problems because they had plenty of their own. Dave was already there when I arrived, sitting at a high-top table in the back corner. You look like shit, he said by way of greeting. Thanks. You always know just what to say. I'm serious. When's the last time you slept? I sleep. I mean really slept, not just lying in bed staring at the ceiling thinking about everything that went wrong. He wasn't wrong. I'd been averaging maybe 4 hours a night, and those weren't quality hours. Mostly I'd lie there replaying conversations with Claire, wondering what I could have done differently, trying to figure out when exactly everything had started falling apart. It's temporary, I said. I just need to adjust to the new routine. The new routine of living like a monk in a studio apartment? It's a one-bedroom. Barely. We ordered beer and wings and talked about safe subjects, work, sports, a movie Dave had seen the week before. But eventually the conversation came back around to Claire and Mark. Have you seen him since? Dave asked. Mark? No, he's called a few times, but I don't answer. What about Claire? We've talked. Mostly about Lizzie, logistics stuff. She wants to try counseling. Do you? I thought about it. I don't know. Part of me thinks we should try, for Lizzie's sake, but another part of me thinks it's too late. How do you come back from something like this? People do it. My cousin Rick and his wife went through something similar a few years ago. They worked it out. Is he happy? Dave was quiet for a moment. He's married. That's not the same thing. No, it's not. We were on our third beer when I saw them. Claire and Mark sitting at a table near the bar, sharing an appetizer and looking like a normal couple on a date. She was wearing the blue dress I'd bought her for her birthday last year, and she was laughing at something Mark had said. Dave followed my gaze and swore under his breath. Want to leave? I should have said yes. Should have finished my beer, paid the tab, and walked out like a mature adult. Instead, I found myself standing up and walking toward their table. Claire saw me coming, and her face went white. Mark looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. James, Claire said, I didn't know you'd be here. It's a public place, I replied. Nice dress. She looked down at herself, remembering. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't think... Don't apologize. It looks better on you than it did in my closet. Mark finally found his voice. Look, man, maybe we should talk about this somewhere else. Talk about what? The fact that you're dating my wife while we're separated? The fact that you're probably paying for dinner with money she got in the divorce settlement that hasn't happened yet? Or the fact that you two are sitting here in public like you're proud of what you did? We're not trying to hurt you, Claire said quietly. No, you're just trying to move on. I get it. Life's short, right? Why waste time feeling guilty when you could be out having fun? People were starting to stare. The conversation at nearby tables had died down, and I could feel eyes on us. Part of me was embarrassed by the scene I was making. Another part of me didn't care. James, please, Claire said. Don't do this here. Do what? Have a conversation with my wife and my best friend? Oh, wait. Ex-wife and ex-friend. My mistake. I turned to Mark. How's the sex, buddy? Is she as enthusiastic with you as she used to be with me? Or has she learned some new tricks since she started cheating? That's enough, Mark said, standing up. He was bigger than me, broader through the shoulders, but I'd been hitting the heavy bag for 3 weeks, and I was angry enough not to care about the size difference. Is it? Because I feel like I'm just getting started. James, stop, Claire said, and there were tears in her eyes. You're better than this. Am I? Because I'm starting to think I'm exactly what this situation calls for. Dave appeared at my elbow. Come on, man, let's go. I looked at Claire and Mark, sitting there in their bubble of new love and justified betrayal, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. They wanted to move on? Fine. But they were going to find out that moving on wasn't as easy as they thought. Enjoy your dinner, I said. And Claire, next time you want to wear that dress on a date, you might want to remember who bought it for you. I walked out of O'Malley's with Dave right behind me. The night air was cool and sharp, and I could hear the river running somewhere in the darkness. Feel better? Dave asked. No, I said. But I'm starting to get some ideas about how I might. The thing about betrayal is that it clarifies your priorities. All the social niceties, the politeness, the desire to be the bigger person. That stuff goes out the window when you realize the people you trusted most have been playing you for a fool. I spent the weekend thinking about what I'd seen at O'Malley's. Claire and Mark, comfortable and happy, acting like they were just another couple out for dinner instead of two people who'd blown up a 16-year marriage. The casual way they dismissed my pain, like it was an unfortunate but necessary casualty of their great love story. By Monday morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to be the noble victim anymore. I wasn't going to quietly accept my role as the discarded husband who graciously stepped aside so his wife could find happiness with someone else. If they wanted to play games, I could play games too. The first step was information. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with, how serious they were, what their plans were, how they saw this whole situation playing out. Fortunately, Claire had always been careless with her phone and computer passwords. She used the same one for everything, Lizzie's birthday followed by our house number. Not very creative, but it made my job easier. I still had access to our shared cloud account, which meant I could see her photos, her messages, her calendar. It felt sleazy, like I was becoming the kind of person I'd always despised, suspicious, paranoid, invasive. But then I'd remember finding them in that hotel room, and the guilt would evaporate. The messages between Claire and Mark went back 8 months, not 6, like she'd told me. They started innocent enough, work stuff, casual conversation about projects they were collaborating on. But by the 3rd month, the tone had shifted. Mark: working late again tonight. James doesn't know how lucky he is. Claire: he's been so distant lately. Sometimes I feel like we're strangers living in the same house. Mark: you deserve better than that. You deserve someone who sees how amazing you are. Claire: stop. You know I can't think about things like that. Mark: why not? You're allowed to be happy, Claire. You're allowed to want more. It was textbook seduction, the kind of thing any married woman might fall for if she was feeling neglected, and her husband's best friend was telling her everything she wanted to hear. Mark had played it perfectly, the sympathetic ear, the shoulder to cry on, the man who understood her in ways her husband never could. The photos were harder to look at. Claire and Mark at restaurants I'd never been to, at parks where they'd walked hand in hand, at the hotel where I'd found them. She looked happier in those pictures than she had in years of family photos. Younger, more alive, like she'd rediscovered some part of herself she'd forgotten existed. There were also photos I recognized, pictures of our house, our backyard, Lizzie's bedroom. Mark had been documenting his conquest, collecting evidence of the life he was helping to destroy. It was methodical, calculating, and it made me realize that this hadn't been a moment of weakness or a crime of passion. This had been a campaign. The calendar entries were the most revealing. Coffee with M appeared twice a week, always during times when I was at work or traveling. Hotel showed up every other Friday, usually with a heart emoji. Dinner with the girls had been code for dates with Mark. Working late meant they were working on each other, but the most interesting entry was scheduled for the following weekend. Tell Jay about us. So they were planning to make it official. Claire was going to ask for a divorce, and they were going to ride off into the sunset together. Probably figured I'd be so devastated that I'd just roll over and give them whatever they wanted. The house, custody of Lizzie, a generous settlement that would let them start their new life without financial stress. I screenshotted everything and saved it to a secure folder on my laptop. Then I started making phone calls. The first call was to Janet Reeves, the best divorce attorney in town. I'd met her at a few Chamber of Commerce events over the years, sharp, aggressive, with a reputation for getting her clients everything they were entitled to, and then some. James Carter, she said when her secretary put me through. I heard about your situation. I'm sorry. Thank you. I'd like to discuss representation. Of course. Can you come in this afternoon? Janet's office was downtown, in one of the old brick buildings that had been converted to professional spaces. Her conference room had tall windows that looked out onto the river, and the walls were lined with law books and framed certificates. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with short blonde hair and the kind of focused intensity that made you understand why she was successful. Tell me what happened, she said. I gave her the condensed version. The hotel, the affair, the separation, the messages I'd found. She took notes on a legal pad and asked pointed questions about our finances, our assets, Lizzie's situation. Do you want to try to save the marriage? She asked. I don't think it can be saved, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to save it. Good, that makes this easier. Now what do you want out of the divorce? I want to keep the house. I want joint custody of Lizzie, and I want to make sure they don't get to just walk away from this without consequences. What kind of consequences? I thought about Claire and Mark at O'Malley's, comfortable and happy while my life fell apart. The kind that make them think twice before they do this to someone else. Janet smiled, and it reminded me of Big Ed's smile at the gym. Not nice exactly, but satisfied. I can work with that. The second call was to a private investigator named Tommy Russo. Dave had recommended him. Apparently Tommy had helped Dave's company with some corporate espionage issues a few years back. Cheating spouse? Tommy asked when I explained what I needed. Among other things. What other things? I want to know everything about Mark Bennett. Where he goes, who he talks to, what he does when he's not with my wife. I want to know if he has any secrets, any vulnerabilities, anything I can use. Use for what? To make his life as complicated as he's made mine. Tommy was quiet for a moment. Look, Mr. Carter, I'll do surveillance, I'll document the affair, I'll help you build a case for your divorce. But I'm not going to help you harass or intimidate anyone. That's not what I do. I'm not talking about harassment. I'm talking about information. Knowledge is power, right? I just want to level the playing field. Okay, I can do that, but it's going to cost you. How much? $500 a day, plus expenses. It was a lot of money, but I had money. One of the advantages of working 60-hour weeks for 16 years was that I'd built up a substantial savings account. Claire didn't know about all of it. I'd been careful to keep some assets separate, just in case. Turns out my paranoia had been justified. Do it. The third call was to my brother David. He was a cop in the next town over, and while we weren't particularly close, we'd always had each other's backs when it mattered. I heard about Claire, he said. Mom told me. I'm sorry, man. Thanks. Listen, I need a favor. What kind of favor? The legal kind. I'm going through a divorce, and I want to make sure I do everything by the book. But I also want to make sure I know all my options. You mean you want to know how far you can push before you cross a line? Something like that. David sighed. James, whatever you're thinking about doing, maybe you should just let the lawyers handle it. I'm not going to do anything illegal. I just want to know what legal looks like. Okay, but be careful. Divorce makes people crazy, and crazy people make stupid decisions. I'm not crazy. I'm focused. Sometimes that's worse. By the end of the week, I had a team in place. Janet was filing the divorce papers and preparing to fight for everything I was entitled to. Tommy was tailing Mark and documenting his activities. David was keeping me informed about what I could and couldn't do without getting arrested. And I was learning things. Interesting things, like the fact that Mark had been married before and his ex-wife had divorced him for cheating. Like the fact that he owed money to some questionable people because of a gambling problem he'd hidden from everyone, including Claire. Like the fact that his job at the consulting firm was less secure than he'd led people to believe. He was actually on thin ice because of some client complaints about his work quality. Mark Bennett wasn't the successful, charming, put-together man he appeared to be. He was a serial cheater with impulse control problems and a career that was hanging by a thread. And Claire, who thought she'd found her soulmate, had actually just traded one set of problems for a much worse set of problems. The question was, what was I going to do with this information? I was sitting in my apartment on Friday night, reading Tommy's latest report, when my phone rang. It was Lizzie. Dad, can you come pick me up? What's wrong, sweetheart? Mom and Mark are here, and they're talking about moving in together. I don't want to be around for that conversation. My hand tightened on the phone. I'll be right there. I drove to the house on Maple Street, the house I'd bought and paid for and been forced to leave so my wife could play house with her boyfriend. Lizzie was waiting on the front porch with an overnight bag. Thanks, she said as she got in the car. You okay? No. This is all really weird, Dad. Mark's trying to act like he's my friend, but he's the reason you and Mom aren't together anymore. And Mom keeps acting like this is all normal, like people get divorced and move their boyfriends in all the time. It's not normal, sweetheart, and you don't have to pretend it is. Are you going to fight for us? For our family? I looked at my daughter, 15 years old, caught between her parents' mess, trying to be mature about something no kid should have to deal with. She deserved better than this. She deserved parents who put her first, who thought about her feelings before they made decisions that would change her life forever. Yes, I said, I'm going to fight. But not for our family. That's already broken. I'm going to fight for you, and for what's right. What does that mean? It means your mom and Mark think they can just take whatever they want without consequences. They're about to find out they're wrong. Lizzie was quiet for a moment. Are you going to hurt them? Not physically. But I'm going to make sure they understand that actions have consequences. That you can't just destroy people's lives and expect to walk away happy. Good, she said, and there was something hard in her voice that reminded me of myself. They deserve it. That night, after Lizzie was asleep in my small second bedroom, I sat at my laptop and started typing. It was time to put my plan into action. The beauty of a small town is that everyone knows everyone else's business. The downside is that everyone knows everyone else's business. Claire and Mark were about to discover which side of that equation they were on. I started with Mark's ex-wife, Linda. Tommy had tracked her down in Portland, where she was working as a real estate agent and apparently doing quite well for herself. A quick Google search gave me her office number. "Linda Bennett?" I said when she answered. "It's Linda Morrison now. I took my maiden name back. Who's this?" "My name is James Carter. I think we have something in common." There was a pause. "If this is about Mark, I don't want to hear it." "Actually, I think you do. He's currently having an affair with my wife." Another pause, longer this time. "Your wife is the blonde from the consulting firm? Claire something." "You know about her?" "Honey, I know about all of them. Mark doesn't change his patterns, he just changes his targets. How long has it been going on?" 8 months that I know of, probably longer. And let me guess, she thinks she's special. Thinks she's the one who finally understands him, who can give him what he needs. Something like that. Linda laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Poor thing, she has no idea what she's gotten herself into. "What do you mean?" "Mark is a narcissist, Mr. Carter, a classic one. He's charming and attentive and makes you feel like the most important person in the world, right up until he gets bored and starts looking for his next conquest. The affair with your wife isn't about love, it's about ego. He wanted to prove he could take another man's woman, especially a friend's woman." "How do you know all this?" "Because I lived it. Mark and I were married for 3 years, and he cheated on me with at least 4 women that I know of. Probably more. He has a type. Married women who are feeling neglected, who are vulnerable to his particular brand of attention. Why didn't you ever warn anyone?" "Who was I going to warn? And would they have listened? When you're in the middle of it, when he's telling you everything you want to hear, you don't want to believe the ex-wife who's obviously just bitter and jealous." She was right, of course. If someone had tried to warn Claire about Mark 6 months ago, she would have dismissed them as a troublemaker trying to interfere with her happiness. "What can you tell me about his gambling?" I asked. "Oh, that's still going on? I thought he might have learned his lesson after he lost our house." "He lost your house?" "Poker games, sports betting, trips to Atlantic City. Mark has no impulse control when it comes to gambling, or anything else for that matter. By the time I divorced him, he owed money to half the bookies in New England." "Does he still owe money?" "I'd be shocked if he didn't. Men like Mark don't change, Mr. Carter. They just get better at hiding their problems until they can't hide them anymore." I thanked Linda and hung up, then called Tommy. "I need you to dig deeper into Mark's finances," I told him, specifically his gambling debts. "That's going to be harder. Those guys don't exactly keep public records." "But you can do it?" "For the right price, yeah. But why do you care how much money he owes?" "Because debt makes people desperate, and desperate people make mistakes." It took Tommy 3 days to get back to me with the information I wanted. Mark owed $37,000 to various bookies and loan sharks, with interest accruing at rates that would make a credit card company blush. He'd been making minimum payments to keep them from breaking his legs, but he was falling further behind every month. "This guy's in serious trouble," Tommy said. "The kind of trouble that doesn't go away just because you fall in love." "What happens if he can't pay?" "Depends on who he owes. Some of these guys are reasonable. They'll work out a payment plan, maybe take a piece of his salary until he's square. Others are less reasonable." "How less reasonable?" "The kind where you end up in the hospital, or worse." Perfect. Mark was a serial cheater with a gambling addiction and dangerous people looking for their money, and Claire thought she'd won the lottery. The next phase of my plan involved Claire's job. She worked for Hartwell Consulting, a mid-sized firm that specialized in helping small businesses with their marketing and operations. It was the kind of place that prided itself on its professional reputation and family-friendly atmosphere. Claire had always been good at her job, organized, creative, able to manage multiple clients without dropping balls. But she'd also been careless about boundaries, especially lately. The affair with Mark had started at work, during work hours, using company resources. If Hartwell's partners knew about it, they might take a dim view of employees who conducted personal business on company time. I'd met Robert Hartwell, the firm's founder, at several Chamber of Commerce events over the years. He was old school, conservative, the kind of man who believed business should be conducted with integrity and professionalism. He also happened to be a deacon at the Methodist Church and had strong opinions about marriage and family values. I called his office on Monday morning. "Robert, this is James Carter from Morrison Marketing. We've met a few times at chamber events. Of course, James. How are you? I've been better, actually. I'm calling because I have some concerns about one of your employees, and I thought you should know about them. What kind of concerns? The kind that might affect your company's reputation if they became public knowledge. There was a pause. I think we should have this conversation in person. We met at his office that afternoon. Robert was in his 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, with the kind of presence that commanded respect. His office was decorated with family photos and civic awards, and there was a Bible on his desk next to his computer. What's this about, James? I told him about Claire and Mark's affair, about how it had started at his company, about the hotel receipts and the messages and the way they'd been conducting their personal business during work hours. I showed him some of the evidence Tommy had gathered, photos of them leaving the office together, receipts from restaurants during times when they were supposed to be working, phone records showing dozens of personal calls during business hours. This is very troubling, Robert said when I finished. Not just the personal conduct, but the way it reflects on our company. We have policies about workplace relationships, and this clearly violates them. I'm not trying to get anyone fired, I lied. I just thought you should know what was going on. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. I'll handle it from here. Thank you. I left Robert's office feeling satisfied. Claire and Mark thought they could conduct their affair without consequences, but they were about to learn otherwise. Hartwell Consulting wasn't the kind of place that tolerated employees who treated the office like their personal dating service. The third phase involved Mark's landlord. He rented a condo in one of the newer developments on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that attracted young professionals who wanted modern amenities without the commitment of home ownership. The building had strict rules about noise, guests, and general conduct. According to Tommy's surveillance, Mark had been bringing Claire to his condo regularly, sometimes during the day when she was supposed to be working. They'd been loud enough to generate complaints from neighbors, and there had been at least one incident where they'd been seen arguing in the parking lot. I made an anonymous call to the building management company. I'm calling to report a problem with one of your tenants, I said. Unit 3B. There's been a lot of noise, people coming and going at all hours, and I think there might be some kind of illegal activity going on. What kind of illegal activity? I'm not sure, but there are always different cars in the parking lot, people I don't recognize, and the noise levels are way beyond what's acceptable for a residential building. We'll look into it. Can I get your name? I'd prefer to remain anonymous, but you might want to check with other tenants. I don't think I'm the only one who's noticed. The beauty of anonymous complaints is that they're hard to trace but easy to investigate. Building management would have to follow up, which meant they'd start paying closer attention to Mark's activities. And given his financial situation, he couldn't afford to lose his housing on top of everything else. The final phase was the most personal. I waited until the following Friday, when I knew Claire and Mark would be at their usual hotel. Then I drove to the house on Maple Street. Lizzie was at a friend's house for the night, which meant I had the place to myself. I still had my key. Claire had never asked for it back, probably because she assumed I was too much of a gentleman to use it. I wasn't feeling particularly gentlemanly. I went through the house systematically, collecting things that belonged to me. Books, CDs, a few pieces of furniture that had been mine before the marriage. I also collected some things that didn't belong to me, but that I thought I deserved. Photo albums, wedding gifts from my family, the good china we'd received as a wedding present. In Claire's home office, I found more evidence of the affair. Love letters from Mark, printed emails, even a burner phone she'd been using to communicate with him. I took photos of everything, then put it all back exactly where I'd found it. But I also left a few things behind. Copies of the divorce papers Janet had prepared. A folder full of evidence about Mark's gambling debts and his history of cheating. A note that simply said, "You wanted honesty in your relationship. Here it is." Then I went upstairs to the bedroom I'd shared with Claire for 16 years. The bed where we'd made love, where we'd conceived Lizzie, where I'd held her when she cried about her father's death. The bed where she now brought Mark to continue their affair. I didn't trash the room or destroy anything. That would have been too obvious, too emotional. Instead, I did something much more subtle and much more devastating. I changed the sheets. I put on the set we'd received as a wedding gift from Claire's grandmother, the ones she'd always said were too nice to use regularly. The ones that reminded her of her family, her history, the life she was throwing away for a man who would eventually cheat on her just like he'd cheated on his ex-wife. Then I left a single yellow rose on the pillow, the same kind of flowers I'd brought to the hotel room where I'd found them together. By the time I left the house, it was dark. I drove back to my apartment feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Phase 1 of my revenge was complete. Now it was time to wait and see how Claire and Mark would react when their perfect little world started falling apart. I didn't have to wait long. The phone started ringing at 6:30 Monday morning. Claire, hysterical and crying, demanding to know what I'd done. "What are you talking about?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she was talking about. "You were in the house. You went through my things. You left those papers, that folder about Mark. How could you violate my privacy like that?" "Your privacy?" "Claire, you're still my wife. That's still my house. I have every legal right to be there. You're trying to sabotage my relationship." "I'm trying to make sure you know who you're in a relationship with. Did you read the folder?" She was quiet for a moment. Mark explained about his ex-wife. She was vindictive, trying to make him look bad because she couldn't handle the divorce. "And the gambling debts? He's getting help for that. It's under control. $37,000 is under control. How do you know about that? Have you been spying on us?" "I've been protecting my interests, which, in case you've forgotten, include my daughter and my financial future, both of which are affected by the choices you make." Claire hung up on me. 20 minutes later, Mark called. "We need to talk," he said. "No, we don't." "You're playing with fire, James. There are people in my life you don't want to mess with." "You mean your bookies? The ones who are going to break your legs if you don't pay up? Yeah, I know about them. Does Claire?" "Stay out of my business." "Your business became my business when you started fucking my wife." "She's not your wife anymore." "Actually, she is. We're separated, not divorced, which means she's still legally married to me while she's shacking up with you. How do you think that's going to play in court?" Mark was quiet for a moment. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You wanted to destroy my marriage? Fine, but don't expect to walk away without getting dirty. You can't prove anything. I can prove the affair. I can prove you've been conducting it on company time, using company resources. I can prove you owe money to dangerous people. I can prove you're a serial cheater who's going to do to Claire exactly what you did to your ex-wife. The question is, how much of that do you want to become public knowledge?" I hung up before he could respond. The next call came from Robert Hartwell's office. His secretary asked if I could come in that afternoon for a follow-up meeting. When I arrived, Robert looked grim. "We've completed our investigation," he said. "Both Claire and Mark have been terminated." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you? Because this feels like a very calculated move on your part." "I just reported what I observed. What you did with that information was your choice. James, I've known you for several years, and I've always respected you as a professional. But what you did here, it feels vindictive." "Maybe it is, but it's also justified. They violated your company's policies, they conducted an affair on your time and your dime, and they showed complete disregard for professional boundaries. If I hadn't reported it, someone else would have eventually." Robert nodded slowly. "You're probably right, but I hope you understand that this kind of thing reflects on everyone involved, including you. I understand, but I'm not the one who chose to have an affair. No, you're just the one who chose to destroy two people's careers over it." I left Robert's office feeling less satisfied than I'd expected. He was right. What I'd done was vindictive, but it was also effective. Claire and Mark were now both unemployed, which would make their financial situation much more complicated. It would also make it harder for them to maintain their fantasy that they were just two people in love who deserved to be happy. The real fireworks started on Wednesday. I was at the gym with Big Ed when Tommy called. "You need to see this," he said. "Can you meet me at the diner on 5th Street? Tommy was already there when I arrived, sitting in a back booth with a manila folder in front of him. He looked excited and a little nervous. "Mark had visitors last night," he said. 3 guys in an expensive car. They didn't look like friends." "His creditors?" "That's my guess. They were at his place for about an hour, and when they left, Mark looked like he'd seen a ghost. This morning he went to the bank, withdrew everything from his checking account, about $4,000. That's not going to make much of a dent in what he owes. No, it's not. But it gets better. After the bank, he went to Claire's house. They had a big fight in the driveway, loud enough that the neighbors came out to watch. Then Claire got in her car and drove to her parents' house." "What kind of fight?" "The kind where she was screaming about lies and money and how he'd ruined her life. The kind where he was begging her not to leave him. The kind where she threw something at his car before she drove away." I felt a grim satisfaction. The cracks were starting to show in their perfect relationship. The stress of unemployment, financial pressure, and the reality of Mark's problems were taking their toll. "There's more," Tommy said. I followed Mark after Claire left. He went to a pawn shop downtown. Came out empty-handed, but he was in there for a while. My guess is he was trying to hawk something for cash. What does he have that's worth anything? Not much, but desperate people do desperate things. That afternoon, I got a call from Lizzie. "Dad, Can I stay with you for a while? Like more than just weekends? What's wrong, sweetheart? Mom's been crying for 2 days. She and Mark had a huge fight, and now she's talking about moving in with Grandma and Grandpa. She lost her job, and Mark lost his job, and everything's just... it's all falling apart. Are you okay? I'm scared. Mom keeps saying we might have to sell the house, and Mark keeps coming by trying to talk to her, and she won't even let him in. It's like she finally figured out what kind of person he really is. You can stay with me as long as you want. We'll figure out the legal stuff later. Thanks, Dad. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. After Lizzie moved in with me, the apartment felt less like a temporary refuge and more like a home. We established new routines, homework at the kitchen table, dinner together every night, weekend trips to the movies or the mall. She seemed happier, more relaxed, like she was finally able to be a teenager instead of a mediator in her parents' war. Claire called less frequently, and when she did, she sounded defeated. The confident, defiant woman who'd been ready to start a new life with Mark had been replaced by someone who was starting to understand the full cost of her choices. I made a mistake, she said during one of our conversations. Mark isn't who I thought he was. What gave it away? The gambling debts, or the fact that he's been lying to you about everything? Don't be cruel, James. I'm trying to apologize. Are you? Because it sounds like you're just disappointed that your boyfriend turned out to be exactly what everyone said he was. I want to try to work things out. Between us, I mean. It's too late for that, Claire. Is it? We have a daughter together. We have history. We could go to counseling, try to rebuild what we had. What we had was a marriage based on trust and commitment. You destroyed that when you decided Mark was more important than your family. I was confused. I was unhappy. I made a mistake. You made a choice. You chose Mark over me, over Lizzie, over the life we'd built together. The fact that it didn't work out the way you wanted doesn't make it a mistake. It makes it a bad choice. She was crying by the time I hung up, but I didn't feel sorry for her. She'd had plenty of opportunities to make different choices, and she'd chosen the path that led her to where she was now. The final act of my revenge played out over the following weekend. I'd been expecting it, actually. Mark was desperate, unemployed, and owed money to dangerous people. It was only a matter of time before he did something stupid. Tommy called me Saturday morning. Mark broke into Claire's house last night. What? Police report says he used his key to get in around 2 a.m. Claire wasn't there, she's been staying with her parents, but a neighbor saw lights and called it in. Cops found Mark going through Claire's jewelry box, probably looking for stuff to pawn. Did they arrest him? Oh yeah. Breaking and entering, burglary, violation of the restraining order Claire filed last week. He's looking at serious jail time. I felt a moment of something that might have been pity. Mark had destroyed his own life as thoroughly as he'd tried to destroy mine. The difference was that I'd had help putting my life back together. Mark was facing his consequences alone. There's something else, Tommy said. Claire wants to see you. She called my office this morning, said it was urgent. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory where we could talk without the weight of our shared history pressing down on us. Claire looked older than she had 6 months ago, tired and worn down by the reality of what her choices had cost her. Thank you for coming, she said. What do you want, Claire? I want to know if you can ever forgive me. I thought about it. Could I forgive her? Maybe, eventually. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, and it didn't mean going back to the way things were. I don't know, I said. Maybe someday? I know I can't undo what I did. But I want you to know that I understand now. I understand what I threw away, what I put Lizzie through, what I did to you. Mark was never worth it. No, he wasn't. But that's not really the point, is it? The point is that you were willing to throw away 16 years of marriage for someone you barely knew. The point is that you were willing to lie to me, to sneak around behind my back, to use our money to pay for your affair. The point is that when you had to choose between your family and your fantasy, you chose the fantasy. I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Good, you should. We sat in silence for a moment, two people who'd once loved each other trying to figure out how to move forward as strangers. What happens now? She asked. Now we get divorced. We figure out custody and support and all the legal stuff. We try to be good parents to Lizzie despite everything that's happened, and we move on with our lives. Separately. Yes, separately. Claire nodded, tears running down her cheeks. I'm sorry, James, for all of it. I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix anything. Sorry doesn't give me back the 16 years I wasted believing in something that wasn't real. I left her sitting in the coffee shop and walked back to my apartment, where Lizzie was doing homework and dinner was waiting in the oven. My new life, built on the ruins of my old one. 3 months later, the divorce was final. I got the house, joint custody of Lizzie, and a settlement that reflected Claire's infidelity and the financial damage she'd caused. Claire moved to another state to start over, away from the whispers and the judgment and the constant reminders of what she'd lost. Mark pleaded guilty to the burglary charges and got 2 years probation and community service. He also filed for bankruptcy, which didn't eliminate his gambling debts, but gave him some legal protection from his creditors. Last I heard, he was working at a car dealership in Springfield and living in a studio apartment above a pizza place. As for me, I moved back into the house on Maple Street with Lizzie. I kept going to the gym with Big Ed, who taught me that the best revenge isn't getting even. It's building something better than what you lost. I started dating again, carefully and slowly, with the knowledge that trust is something that has to be earned and maintained. And sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet and Lizzie is asleep, I think about that hotel room and those ugly carpets and the moment when everything changed. I think about the man I was before, trusting, naive, willing to believe the best about people even when the evidence suggested otherwise. That man is gone. The man who replaced him is harder, more careful, less willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. But he's also stronger, more self-reliant, better able to protect himself and the people he loves from those who would take advantage of their trust. Claire wanted me to be someone who would understand her needs, who would listen to her feelings, who would put her happiness above everything else. She got Mark instead, and Mark gave her exactly what she deserved. Nothing but pain and regret and the knowledge that some choices can't be undone. I gave her something different. I gave her consequences. I gave her the understanding that actions matter, that betrayal has a price, that you can't destroy people's lives and expect to walk away unscathed. And in the end, that was the best gift I could have given her. Because now she knows who she really is, and more importantly, she knows who I really am. The man who doesn't forgive and forget, the man who fights back, the man who wins.